Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we will continue our reading of Black Bourgeoisie by E. Franklin Frazier. Tonight, we'll be talking about recognition of the race, the Negro press, and wish fulfillment. Hopefully, it will be as enlightening for you as it has been for me. We'll be starting on page 157 of the text.
Greetings. My name is the Revolutionary Matron, and my show is called The Learning Curve. I broadcast on a network called KWAZ Radio. There are other hosts on the network I'd like you to meet.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed here belong solely to the respondents, and they do not necessarily reflect any broadcast networks, affiliates, nor sponsors. The Learning Curve is a broadcast created for the benefit of my global community. Black is a consciousness. Content is being used for our commentary, research, criticism, education, scholarship, teaching, preaching, and news reporting. No copyright infringement is intended. I will make enunciation mistakes. I will give you my opinion about the information. And if you ever ask, I will send you my source.
Greetings, Anthony McPhail. Thanks for tuning in. The Negro Press and Wish Fulfillment, recognition of the race. Because of its deep-seated inferiority complex, the Black bourgeoisie hungers for any form of recognition by people or groups that have status or power in the world. The Negro Press provides this recognition for the Black bourgeoisie in various ways. It plays up any recognition that is accorded American Negroes by any of the so-called independent colored nations. In the past, the subjects of some of these colored nations studiously avoided identification with American Negroes. I didn't know that. Nevertheless, when in recent years the subjects of these colored nations showed a disposition to accept American Negroes, the Black bourgeoisie seized upon the opportunity to gain recognition. Whenever American Negroes visit Haiti and are accorded any recognition, or whenever Haitians in the United States invite them to their social affairs, the event is featured in the Negro press. Moreover, despite the fact that Ethiopians make it clear that they are not Negroes, the Black bourgeoisie seeks every opportunity to gain some form of recognition from the emperor of the country. When the emperor visited the United States recently, the Negro press played up the fact that he consented to receive one of their reporters and had sent a message to American Negroes advising them to continue their social and intellectual advancement with Christian courage. The Negro press also features any recognition shown Negroes by Liberia. This does not mean, however, that the Black bourgeoisie is seeking identification with Africans as a racial group. Because of their ignorance, the majority of the Black bourgeoisie still regard Africans as savages or exotic people and condescendingly and speak condescendingly of the developments which have occurred in Africa if they happen to hear of them. At the same time, the Negro press, in its role as the defender of the race, may give lip service to pride in being a Negro. For example, the Negro press featured a letter written by Jackie Robinson, the black baseball idol, to a Negro orphan who had been overheard to say that he wished he were white, telling him to be proud that he was a Negro. A mere perusal of Negro newspapers and magazines will reveal that a large part of their income is derived from the advertisements of products which will remove or modify Negroid characteristics, so bleaching creams and hair straighteners. These advertisements tell how the Negro can rid himself of his black or dark complexion or how he can straighten his hair. It was through the manufacture of such products that Madam Walker, one of the first rich Negroes to gain notoriety, made a fortune and set a standard for conspicuous consumption that has become legendary. While rejecting any genuine identification with the Black race, the Black bourgeoisie seeks, nevertheless, whatever recognition it may enjoy because of the high status of individuals of Negro ancestry in the world. Consequently, the Negro press is compelled to focus attention upon the relatively few Negroes who have gained any form of recognition in the white world. The few Negroes who have gained recognition consist chiefly of entertainers and leaders of organizations who have contacts with whites. Dr. Ralph J. Bunche has a unique position in this respect, since not a week passes that the Negro press fails to carry news about him and his achievements. Every recognition that Dr. Bunche has received has been interpreted as a form of recognition for the Black bourgeoisie, who have been all the more inclined to identify with him because he is not Black. In playing up the recognition which the Negro press receives, the Negro press utilizes the most trivial events. A Negro actor needs only to play the most insignificant role, even the role of a servant, in connection with some prominent white actor for the event to be played up as a form of recognition. Now, there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that. Sometimes the recognition which is accorded the Negro involves questionable relations with whites. For example, the fact that a white man was found dead in Canada with an American Negro woman in what was described as a love tryst was featured on the front page of a Negro newspaper. In reporting any recognition which the Negro may receive, the Negro press is not concerned with the principles or values except where status, in a narrow sense, is concerned. It would be quick to criticize an Uncle Tom or a Negro who would suggest that the Negro should not be treated as a citizen with the same rights as white citizens. But the Negro press is not concerned with broader social and economic values. It will give prominence with avowed or unavowed approval to any recognition that is given to the Negro by an organization in the United States, so long as there is no implication of racial inferiority. For example, it featured the election of a Negro doctor to the presidency of the local affiliate of the American Medical Association, although the doctor had opposed a national health program which would have benefited the mass of Negroes and had been elected to an office in the American Medical Association, which is opposed to socialized medicine. Or, to take an example on the international front, the fact that Black troops participated in the defense of Dien Bien Phu is the only interest that the Negro press has shown in the war in Indochina. Even when the Negro press shows any interest in the colonial problems, it is generally concerned with the social status and recognition of the Black elite in colonial areas. Greetings, Forecast. Thanks for tuning in. The lack of interest in the Black bourgeoisie and its mouthpiece, the Negro press, in the broader issues facing the modern world is due to the fact that the Negro has developed no economic or social philosophy except the opportunistic philosophy that the Black intelligentsia has evolved to justify an anonymous and insecure position. Of course, plain ignorance of the nature of the modern world and the revolution which is in progress accounts also for the outlook of the new Negro press. Negro journalists have been recruited on the whole from the inferior, segregated Negro schools, and their outlook has been restricted by the social and mental isolation of the Negro world. Following the example of the white press, the Negro press has its commentators or columnists who discuss current issues for their readers. With a few rare exceptions, the columnists who write for the Negro press reveal the limitations of their knowledge of economic and social forces in the modern world. When they would pretend to be sophisticated, they exhibit a smart alecky or bumptious attitude toward sound knowledge. They are generally careful, however, to never offend the Black bourgeoisie, nor to challenge white opinion on fundamental economic and political issues. In fact, except in regard to race relations, the columnists generally echo the conservative opinions and platitudes of the white world on crucial issues. For one example, for example, one widely read columnist who boasts of independent thinking has constantly asserted that he opposed the Chinese Republic's shooting its way into the United Nations. By echoing the opinions of the white community, the intellectual leaders of the Black bourgeoisie hope to secure the approval and recognition of the white property class with whom they seek identification. Greetings, Blanca. Thanks for tuning in. In creating a world of make believe to satisfy the craving of the Black bourgeoisie for recognition, the Negro press constantly draws upon the reputed experiences of Negroes in Europe. Since the majority of Negroes, including even those who are educated, still regard Europe as a faraway, fabulous land, the reporters for the Negro press can give free rein to their imagination. From time to time, the Negro press gives glowing accounts of Negro men and women who have captivated European royalty. Negroes living in humble circumstances on meager incomes are reported often to have richly furnished chateaus, which are the meeting place for the European intellectuals and people of wealth. In a recent issue of Ebony, one reads of a retired Negro customs inspector who has become the playboy of the Riviera and associates with princes and princesses. When Negro entertainers have entertained for wealthy or aristocratic Europeans, it is reported that in the Negro press, as if they were accepted by European society. Excuse me. The reporters of the performances of Negro artists are generally misrepresentations of their actual accomplishments. There was, for example, the case of the Negro pianist who, according to the Negro press, had been acclaimed by French critics, whereas in fact, the critics had said that her performance was on the level of a beginning student. Similar misrepresentations are reported concerning the intellectual achievements of Negroes in Europe. Negroes who scarcely ever attend the lectures at European universities are represented as brilliant students. Not long ago, when a president of a Negro college who could scarcely read French visited Europe, it was reported that he dazzled professors in French universities by lecturing in perfect French. So they lie in their papers. These fanciful reports are provided for the Black bourgeoisie who remain at home. The Black bourgeoisie, who have always exhibited an intense xenophobia, especially where white people are concerned, have avoided traveling abroad because, as one Negro school teacher put it, no one would know who we are. In recent years, however, the Black bourgeoisie have begun to go abroad. Although many of them are school teachers, they do not want to travel as white school teachers because they are members of Negro society. Therefore, in preparation for their voyage, they spend large sums of money on clothes which they will never have occasion to wear. Since they fail to meet European royalty, they generally write home stories of how they impressed Europeans with the money which they spent freely. So they're impressing them with conspicuous consumption. Nevertheless, the Negro press generally reports their journeys to Europe as conquests of European society. As we see then, the fantastic accounts of achievements of Negroes and the recognition accorded them by the white constitute important elements of the world of make believe which the Negro press has created to compensate for the feelings of inferiority of the Black bourgeoisie. But there are still more important elements in the world of unreality in which the Black bourgeoisie lives. These consist of the reports on the activities of Negro society, which form the major part of the news items on individuals in the Negro press. Because of the importance given to Negro society and the values which it cherishes, it will be necessary to consider this phase of the world of make believe separately in the following chapter. Chapter 9. Society with status without substance. There is a phase of the world of make believe of the Black bourgeoisie which requires special treatment, namely the activities of those persons who constitute its society. Although Negro society was not created by the Negro press, it is the Negro press which feeds and perpetuates the illusions of this element in the Black bourgeoisie. The activities of society are not simply a form of social life engaged in for pleasure and friendly social intercourse. They are engaged in primarily in order to maintain status or as part of the competition for status. The activities of society serve to differentiate the Black bourgeoisie from the masses of poor Negroes and at the same time to compensate for the exclusion of the Black bourgeoisie from the larger white community. However, the behavior and standards of consumption which are maintained by society generally lack the economic base which such activities presuppose. Society thus provides one of the main escapes from the world of reality into the world of make believe. So they have all of these beautiful dances and parties and activities and events, and they really don't have the funds to back up the spending that they're doing. Evolution of society. Society among Negroes had its roots among the house servants who enjoyed a certain prestige among the other slaves on the plantation during their social gatherings. An ex slave who wrote his autobiography after escaping to freedom has provided a vivid account of the status of this group on the plantation. It was about 10 o'clock when the aristocratic slaves began to assemble, dressed in the cast off finery of the master and mistress, swelling out and putting on airs in imitation of those they were forced to obey from day to day. House servants were, of course, the stars of the party. All eyes were turned on them to see how they conducted, for they, among slaves, are what the military man would call the fuglemen. The field hands, and such of them as have generally been excluded from the dwelling of their owners, look to the house servants as a pattern of politeness and gentility. And indeed, it is often the only method of obtaining any knowledge of the manners of which is called genteel society. Hence, they are ever regarded as a privileged class and are sometimes greatly envied while others are bitterly hated. After emancipation, some of the social distinctions which had grown up among the slaves continued to function. Negroes who were free before the Emancipation Proclamation or who could boast of a distinguished family background set themselves apart from the masses of freedmen and constituted a distinct upper social class. Many of them boasted of their blood, which generally referred to their white ancestry. A mulatto witness of the history of Negroes during the years following the Civil War has left a rather satirical account of the emergence of society among them in the nation's capital. Quote, there is another element in this strange, heterogeneous conglomeration which, for want of a better name, has been styled society, and it is that this species of African humanity which is forever and ever informing the uninitiated that a narrow escape they had from being born white. They have small hands, aristocratic insteps, and wear blue veins. They have their auburn hair and finely chiseled features. They are uneducated as a rule. In other words, the largest number of them, though it would be hardly discovered unless they opened their mouths in the presence of their superiors in intellect, which they are very careful not to do. In personal appearance, they fill the bill precisely so far as importance and pomposity goes, but no farther. They are opposed to manual labor. Their physical organization couldn't stand it. They prefer light work such as shuffling cards or dice or removing the spirits of fermenta from the gaze of rude men. If somebody else becomes responsible for the damage. Around the festive board, they are unequaled in their verbosity, and especially for their aptness in tracing their ancestry. One will carry you away back to the times of William the Silent and bring you up to 18 so and so, and show how illustrious his lineage and pedigree are. His great great grandfather's mother in law was the Marchioness so and so, and his father was the ex Chief Justice Chastity of South Carolina or some other southern state with a polygamous record. Washington became, in fact, the center of Negro society and retained this distinction after the First World War. This was owing partly to the fact that until the mass migrations of Negroes to northern cities, Washington, with around 90,000 Negroes, had a larger Negro community than any other city in the United States until 1920. The preeminence of Washington as the center of Negro society was due more especially to other factors. Because of its relatively large Negro professional class, including teachers in the segregated public school system, doctors, dentists, and lawyers, and large numbers of Negroes employed by the federal government, Negroes in the nation's capital had incomes far above those in other parts of the country. This enabled Washington's colored society to engage in forms of consumption and entertainment that established its preeminence among American Negroes. Moreover, the Negro Society, which developed in Washington, was composed of the upper class mulattoes, who, in fleeing from persecution and discriminations in the South, brought to Washington the social distinctions and color snobbery that had been the basis of their ascendancy in the South. The First World War, which initiated a period of increased social as well as physical mobility in the Negro population, set in motion social and economic forces that inaugurated a new stage in the evolution of Negro society. First, family background and color snobbishness based upon white ascendancy became less important for membership among the social elite. Although in Charleston, South Carolina, in Atlanta, Georgia, in New Orleans, and in other southern cities, Negro society might continue to boast of white or mulatto ancestors. In New York, Chicago, and Detroit, those who were becoming socially prominent were beginning to ask, what is his profession or what is his income? Even in Washington, where a light complexion had been so important in society, these questions were being asked. Blue veins and auburn hair and finely chiseled features were beginning to be ridiculed as the basis of social prominence. A newspaper edited by a pure black Negro carried articles each week showing up the foibles of the mulattoes who constituted Negro society. During a decade or so following the First World War in both northern and southern cities, education and occupation increasingly supplanted family background and a light complexion as a basis for admission to the Negro social elite among Negroes. For example, in New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia, Negroes who had constituted Negro society because they were mulattoes and acted like gentlemen were pushed aside because they were engaged in personal services. The Negro doctors, dentists, lawyers, and businessmen who could not boast of white ancestors or did not know their white ancestors were becoming the leaders of Negro society. Even if they did not act like gentlemen, they were able to imitate white society in their standards of consumption and entertainment. So it was more important to imitate white society. In fact, they tended to ridicule the so called culture and exclusiveness of the older Negro society. During this transition period in the development of Negro society, the socially prominent among Negroes were developing the new social values and new orientation towards the American environment that have become characteristic of Negro society at the present time. Although among isolated enclaves in the Negro communities of both southern and northern cities, there is an attempt to constitute a social elite after the manner of the older Negro society. Such Negroes are generally looked upon as curiosities. Family background has little significance in Negro society in the present day, although there is an unavowed color snobbishness which has ceased to have much importance. Education, from the standpoint of fundamental culture, has completely lost its significance. There is still a certain snobbishness in regard to one's occupation, but the most important thing about one's occupation is the amount of income which it brings. Therefore, at the present time, Negro society is constituted largely of professional and business men and women with large incomes that enable them to engage in conspicuous consumption. From time to time, the incomes of these Negro professional men who are socially prominent are revealed to have been derived from traffic in narcotics and performing abortions, while it is difficult at times to determine whether socially prominent businessmen are engaged in legitimate or illegitimate business. So it doesn't matter where the money came from as long as they're able to participate in conspicuous consumption. That's what they care about. The gaudy carnival. One may get some idea of the nature of society in the make believe world of the Black bourgeoisie from an article entitled Society Rulers of 20 Cities, which was published in May of 1949, Ebony Magazine. The rulers of society include 5 wives of physicians, 3 wives of dentists, 3 women school teachers, 2 wives of morticians, a social worker, the owner of a newspaper, the wife of a lawyer, a banker's daughter, a concert pianist, and the wife of a college president. Of course, there are Negro women in these cities who would challenge the social ascendancy of these so called leaders, since there is much competition to be known as a ruler of society. In northern cities, especially, there are wives of politicians and businessmen who, because of their ability to engage in conspicuous consumption, would not accept these so called leaders. Nevertheless, the rulers of society reported in Ebony are representative on the whole of the leaders in society among the Black bourgeoisie, both with respect to the source of income and the style of life of this element among the Black bourgeoisie. One of the rulers of the colored society, a physician's wife who works every day, is celebrated for her big 3 parties each year. The ruler of society in a southern city has gained fame because she entertains Negroes who have a national reputation. Another has gained notoriety because she is a friend of Lena Horne and gave a cocktail party for the famous movie actress. A former social worker is reported to have won her position in society because certain white writers and white playboys have paid attention to her. Another gave a lavish debutante parties for her daughters. A southern ruler of society seemingly won eminence because her husband gave her a Cadillac automobile and a mink coat. The eminence of one school teacher in society seems to stem from the fact that she gives expensive parties and drives a Mercury automobile. A physician and his wife, who have been to Europe, proved their social eminence by giving a continental dinner consisting of 9 courses for 56 guests, which required 4 hours and 35 minutes to consume. In one case, the reader learns that a particular ruler of society is noted for receptions in her home, the walls and ceilings for which including the bathroom, are covered with mirrors. Details are supplied concerning the other rulers of society who own Cadillacs, have elaborate recreation rooms, and supply unlimited food and liquor to their guests. For that section of the Black bourgeoisie, which devotes itself to society, life has become a succession of carnivals. In cities all over the country, Negro society has inaugurated debutante balls or cotillions, which provide an opportunity every year for the so called rich Negroes to indulge in lavish expenditures and create a world of fantasy to satisfy their longing for recognition. Very often, these rich Negroes mortgage their homes in order to maintain the fiction that they are able to indulge in these vast spectacles of make believe. In Philadelphia, the debutante ball known as the Pink Cotillion is reputed to excel all others in the country. At this debutante ball, noted for the money spent on decorations and the expensive gowns and jewels worn by the women, an award is made each year to some distinguished Negro. This award consists of a Diamond Cross of Malta. During the years 1949, 1950, and 1951, the Diamond Cross of Malta was presented successively to Marian Anderson, Dr. Ralph Bunche, and Mrs. Mary McLeod Bethune. The debutante balls are written up in the Negro press with pictures in order to show the splendor and wealth of those who participate in this world of make believe. The debutante balls are only one manifestation of the carnival spirit of Negro society, which never slackens, especially since the Black bourgeoisie have been enjoying unusual prosperity during recent years. The weekly accounts in the Negro press of the activities of Negro society are invariably stories of unbridled extravagance. These stories include a catalog of the jewelry, the gowns, and the mink coats worn by the women, often accompanied by an estimate of the value of the clothes and jewelry and the cost of the parties which they attend. One constantly reads of chauffeured Cadillac cars in which they ride to parties and the cost of the homes in which they live. The carnival spirit of Negro society, with its emphasis on conspicuous consumption, has permeated the Negro colleges, where the fraternities and sororities compete with each other to excel in the amount of money spent for flowers, decorations, and entertainment. It was reported in the Negro press that during the Christmas holidays in 1952, 9 Greek letter societies meeting in 4 cities spent more than $2,225,000. Most of the persons attending the college fraternities and sororities were not, of course, college students, but, as the article stated, top social and intellectual leaders. For these top social and intellectual leaders, the fraternities and sororities represented their most serious interests in life. Playing seriously. For a large section of the Black bourgeoisie, their activities as members of society are most often are their most serious or often their only serious preoccupation. Their preoccupation with society has its roots in the traditions of the Negro community in the United States. As we have seen above, in their position of house servants during slavery, Negroes acquired from their white masters notions of what constituted social life or society. After emancipation, they continued in the role of personal servants and therefore saw the white man only in his home or when he was engaged in recreation. They never saw the white man at work in the shop or factory and when he engaged in the serious matter of business. As a consequence, they devoted much time and much of their meager resources in attempting to carry on a form of social life similar to the whites. For many Negroes, it appears that social life became identified with the condition of freedom. Social life among the masses of Negroes was a free and spontaneous expression of their desire to escape from the restraints of work and routine. But for those who set themselves apart as Negro society, social life became more formalized activity. Among the Negro elite, as well as among the masses, social life acquired a significance that it did not have among white Americans. The great significance which social life has for Negroes has been due to their exclusion from participation in American life. The numerous social clubs and other forms of voluntary associations which have existed among them provided a form of participation that compensated for their rejection by the white community. At the same time, these various social clubs have been a part of the struggle for Negroes for status within their segregated communities. The elite, who have set themselves apart as Negro society and have attempted to maintain an exclusive social life, have been extremely conscious of their inferior status in American life. For them, social life has not only provided a form of participation, it has represented an effort to achieve identification with upper class whites by imitating, as far as possible, the behavior of white society. The exclusion of middle class Negroes from participation in the general life of the American community has affected their entire outlook on life. It has meant that the whites did not take Negroes seriously, that whites did not regard the activities of Negroes as of any real consequence in American life. It has tended to encourage a spirit of irresponsibility or an attitude of play or make believe among them. Consequently, Negroes have played at conducting their schools, at running their businesses, and at practicing their professions. The spirit of play or make believe has tended to distort or vitiate the ends of their most serious activities. For example, in a number of cities where Negro doctors have been excluded from joining the white professional associations, they have set up reading societies, supposedly to offset such exclusion. But on the whole, these reading societies have turned out to be social clubs for drinking and playing poker. Playing, then, has become the one activity which the Negro may take seriously. In fact, great importance is attached to Negro society in the Negro press because it is a serious preoccupation among the Black bourgeoisie. One can get some notion of its importance from the editorial in the September 1953 number of Ebony entitled, "Is Negro Society Phony?" The editorial asserts that those who say that Negro society is a pretense are envious of those who have been accepted by society. It goes on to show that members of American white society have achieved entrance in the same manner as the members of Negro society. When the editorial points out that people like Dr. Bunch, Louis Armstrong, Marian Anderson, Mary McLeod Bethune, and Joe Louis have won their places in Negro society by achievement. The article concludes with the statement that brains rather than blood should be the basis for admission to Negro society, and that if this is made the basis of acceptance, then Negro youth will seek recognition by Negro society. It seemingly never occurred to the writer of the editorial that Negroes with brains would prefer not to seek escape in the world of make believe of the Black bourgeoisie. The exaggerated importance of which the exaggerated importance which the Black bourgeoisie attaches to society is revealed in the emphasis placed by the Negro press upon which the social aspects of events concerning Negroes. When it was announced recently that a Negro businessman had been named as a member of the American delegation to the United Nations, it was stated in a leading Negro publication that he was invading the glittering international UN scene, the most exclusive and powerful social set in the world. The news item added that the nominee had already made plans to acquire new formal wear and that he was preparing his wardrobe for his entrance into the United Nations. In fact, generally, when white middle class people have sought the cooperation of the Black bourgeoisie in some serious community project, they have found it difficult unless it could be interpreted as a social event. For example, such liberal middle class white groups as the League of Women Voters and the League of Women Shoppers have constantly complained that they could not interest middle class Negro women. On the other hand, let us take the following account of an interracial group of women who raised money for the fight against infantile paralysis. There appeared in the February 25th, 1954 issue of Jet under the section labeled People Are Talking About the statement that $1,500 was raised by a group of 15 white and colored society women who wore over $500,000 worth of fur and gowns. Anyone who achieves any distinction in any field may become a socialite in the Negro press. It is not simply that, as a Negro journalist stated, anybody not in the criminal class can get a personal or social note in the Negro paper. This suggests only a small town attitude which may be found among many people. In making a socialite of a Negro, the Negro press is attributing him or her to the highest conceivable status and recognition. For example, when a Negro anthropologist who never attended social functions gave a lecture in Chicago, the account of the Negro press referred to him as a socialite. Consequently, one learns in the Negro press that wives of gamblers, policemen, waiters, college professors, doctors, lawyers, petty civil servants, and public school teachers are all socialites, often when their husbands are not so designated. It should be pointed out, however, that being called a socialite in the Negro press is generally regarded as a high compliment by the members of the Black bourgeoisie, whatever may be their occupations. As a consequence of the prestige of society, many Negro professional men and women take more seriously their recreation than their professions. Once the writer heard a Negro doctor who was prominent socially say he would rather lose a patient than have his favorite baseball team lose a game. This was an extreme expression of the relative value of professional work and recreation among the Black bourgeoisie. At the same time, it is indicative of the value which many Negro professional men and women, including college professors, place upon sports. Except when they are talking within the narrow field of their professions, their conversations are generally limited to sports, baseball, and football. They follow religiously the scores of the various teams and the achievements of all the players. For hours, they listen to the radio accounts of sports and watch baseball and football games on television. They become learned in the comments of sports writers. Often, they make long journeys in order to see their favorite teams, white or Negro, play baseball and football games. Although they may pretend to appreciate cultural things, this class, as a whole, has no real appreciation of art, literature, or music. One reads, for example, under that what people are talking about in the September 2nd, 1954 issue of Jet, that a wealthy Negro doctor in Detroit is planning to install a Hammond organ on his luxurious yacht. The decor of their homes reveals the most atrocious and childish tastes. Expensive editions of books are bought for decoration and left unread. The Black bourgeoisie, especially the section which forms Negro society, scarcely ever reads books for recreation. Consequently, their conversation is trivial and exhibits a childish view of the world. The prominent role of sports in the serious playing of Negro societies stems partly from certain traditions in the Negro community. It reflects to some extent the traditions of the gentlemen who engaged in no serious work, but in addition, preoccupation of Negro society, which with sports is related to its preoccupation with gambling, especially poker. This latter preoccupation is especially significant because it is related to the religious outlook of the Black bourgeoisie, especially Negro society. The forecast says no, rich and poor Negroes rarely read and only talk about sports, spending money on it. Yeah, because they place those bets, don't they? From church to chance. The Black bourgeoisie cannot escape completely from the religious traditions of the Negro masses, since many of those who are achieving middle class status have come from the masses. They are often haunted by their fears and beliefs which were instilled in them during their childhood. However, they are glad to escape from the prohibitions which the Baptists and Methodists placed on dancing, card playing, and gambling. They want to escape from the concern of the Baptists and Methodists with sin and death and salvation. The middle class Negro is like a suburban agnostic with whom Mary Kingsley compared the missionary made African, who keeps the idea of immortality of the soul and a future of heaven, but discards the unpleasant ideas of hell. The middle class Negro will tell you that he believes in a supreme being, some vague entity who runs the universe and the immortality of the soul, but he does not believe in hell because he thinks that man has hell on earth. As a rule, the Black bourgeoisie do not give themselves to the reflection on these matters. They are regarded as impractical and unpleasant questions which should be left to a few queer Negroes who should spend their time more profitably in making money. An outstanding educated Negro minister who is sort of a mystic was generally regarded with the amusement by the Black bourgeoisie and sought a more congenial audience in an interracial church and as a visiting preacher in white colleges. When the middle class Negro abandons the traditional religion of his ancestors, he seldom adopts a new philosophical orientation in regard to existence and the world about him. Since he is isolated intellectually as he is socially in the American environment, he knows nothing of humanistic philosophy and rejects materialism because of his prejudice based upon ignorance. Negro intellectuals have nothing to offer him since they have never developed a social philosophy, except perhaps a crude and unsophisticated opportunism. Therefore, as a rule, the middle class Negro is the prey of all forms of spiritualism. He avoids the fantastic extravagances of Father Divine's cult, partly because lower class Negroes are associated with it. He concedes, however, that Father Divine does some good because his followers are honest and faithful domestic servants. Nevertheless, the Black bourgeoisie are interested in psychic phenomena because, according to them, scientists do not know everything. Therefore, with the little reading in which they indulge is often concerned with the faith healing and popular accounts of psychic phenomena. In some cities, it has become a fad for members of Negro society to make a novena, though they are not Catholics, and they have reported that this religious exercise has resulted in their securing a new dress or mink coat they have always desired. Without the traditional religion of the Negro and a philosophy to give them an orientation towards life, the Black bourgeoisie, especially the element among them known as Negro society, have often become the worshippers of the god of chance. This new faith or dependence upon chance finds its extreme expression in their preoccupation with gambling, including the numbers, the illegal lotteries in American cities, betting on horses, and more especially poker. At one time, the Black bourgeoisie regarded the numbers as a lower class form of gambling and restricted themselves to betting on horses. Likewise, playing poker was formerly regarded by them as a pastime for the sporting element among Negroes. But with the emergence of the new Negro society, playing the numbers has become respectable. This is not strange since some members of society derive their incomes from the numbers. Therefore, it is not unusual for Negro professional men and their wives to play the numbers daily. Even the wives of Negro college professors are sometimes writers or collectors of numbers for the numbers racket. But poker has become the most important form of recreation for members of society among the Black bourgeoisie. In fact, poker is more than a form of recreation, it is one absorbing interest of Negro society. It is the chief subject of conversation. Negro society, women talk over the telephone for hours on the last poker game. According to an article in Ebony, March 1953, the bane of many society editors is that social affairs turn into poker games, though the latter can be exciting when the stakes involve homes, lots, and automobiles. Even a chance encounter of members of Negro society will lead to a poker game. Moreover, poker has tended to level all social barriers among Negroes. At the richly furnished homes of Negro doctors, chauffeurs, waiters, gasoline station attendants gather with college professors to play poker. So important has poker become among the Black bourgeoisie that the measure of a man has become the amount of stakes which he can place at a poker game. In many cities in the United States, the Black bourgeoisie usually spend their weekends in what might be called poker marathons or poker orgies, which last sometimes from Friday night until Monday morning. Some poker players who still have old fashioned religious ideas may leave the poker table long enough to go to church because, as they say, they believe in God. But usually, most of them, being refreshed with food, remain throughout the marathon. Some college professors boast of leaving the poker table and going directly to lecture to their classes on Monday. Likewise, Negro surgeons have been heard to boast of leaving the poker table and going directly to perform an operation. Because of their devotion to poker, some middle class Negroes form groups and journey periodically from city to city in order to engage in these gambling orgies. News of these orgies, with details emphasizing the high stakes played, are the main topic of conversation among Negro society. The importance of poker may be measured in the fact that some middle class Negroes assert that poker is the one thing in life that prevents them from going crazy. Therefore, the role of poker as a religious force in the lives of the Black bourgeoisie cannot be discounted. The activities of Negro society are an extreme expression of the world of make believe. In the next chapter, we shall look behind the masks of those who play the role in this spectacle and in the world of the Black bourgeoisie generally. Greetings, Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. As you can see, the Black bourgeoisie is often trying to imitate what they saw of white life. But because they only ever saw the white man at home or at leisure, the parts that they copied from the white man were unfortunately him playing or him at his worst or him relaxing at home. They never saw him working. They never saw him at his job. They never saw him doing the business of making money or of money getting. So they have a twisted view and perception of what white people are and what white people do because they spend all this time around white people, but it's at home or it's around their children or it's while they're, out partying. And they think that that's what it is to be white. And that's the part of white society that they want to copy and emulate. And don't they don't have the opportunity to really learn what white people's lives are really like, what it's like for them to go to work, what their relationships are like with their bosses, what their purpose is. So, as you can see, we have a lot to learn, but we have to stop copying the conspicuous consumption that has been handed down to us as a culture, because that is no way to run a culture by determining how much money you can spend on something. You know, how many Cadillacs you have, how much money you have, like the ladies that came together to raise money for the paralyzed infants. And they raised $1,500, but they were wearing over $500,000 worth of furs, jewels, and clothing. That's ridiculous. All right, guys. I want to thank Anthony McPhail, the Forecast, Blanca J, and the Bitter Medicine Podcast, Koku, for being here tonight. I know that Brother Bakari is listening. I know that Sister Raw and the elders are listening. I know that Bawana Haguziki is listening. I know that KW Don 7 is listening, and so many others. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I value your opinions and I value your input. I'll be posting that question about what we should read next soon. If you have some suggestions, please leave it in the comments. I thank you, and I will see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Peace, guys.